Sunday.
somehow.
Yes. So how are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Hmm.
It's been a low-key weekend, but happy to be here for Star Trek Sunday.
Happy to talk some Star Trek. Yes, indeed. Hey, Mikhail. Yeah, me too. And weirdly, we picked some great episodes for Father's Day. Today we're going to be talking about, we're in so if that's the first time you're joining us, I always forget to do this. If it's the first time you're joining us, Samantha is watching Star Trek for the very first time. I've already watched Voyager. You've watched Discovery. You've watched Picard. So we're a little bit out of order.
But
Hey, done. Um, and now we're into TNG. So we are nearing the end. We're near the end of season 6.
yeah,
And yeah, how are you enjoying it so far?
I am. And for people who don't know, the reason I hadn't seen Star Trek before was because of a particular episode in Next Generation. So now that we're almost done with Next Gen, I feel like I've really reached a threshold.
Got over the which it
Yeah.
is funny because so Samantha and I started doing this on a different on your channel, and I'll put a sort of link to it if people want to watch the older episodes. But we got to that TNG episode and we were both like, okay, I think we're done. And then a couple months ago we were like, oh, let's keep going, let's do
Let's
this again.
keep doing it. Yeah.
This is
I needed time to process that I'd seen it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, okay, where am I in my life now? Who
Yeah.
am I now, really, now that I've seen
Right.
that episode? So today we're going to talk about both parts of Birthright. We're going to talk about Starship Mine. We're going to talk about lessons, the chase, and frame of mind. So we're going to try to get through about 6 episodes in the hour. But let's start out with Birthright. So this is a Father's Day episode.
You
I
could
feel
say that.
yeah. The theme is fathers. This is the one where, like I said, it's a two-parter. Data has a dream. They're on Deep Space Nine. That's the most exciting thing for me. They're on Deep Space Nine. They are doing some experiments with Julian Bashir, and then Data gets fried, and he has a dream, and he sees his creator Sung in this dream, and he's trying to chase that down. At the same time, Worf gets like this notification that his father is still alive, that he survived the Kittimer massacre, and he's living in a Romulan prisoner camp. That's kind of the first. The first episode focuses on Data. The second episode focuses more on Worf, where he gets to this camp, finds a bunch of Klingons there with Romulans, and it turns out that they're survivors and they're kind of just hiding away from the Klingon Empire because they didn't die honorably, and so they're trying to just live out their lives, and they have reached peace with these Romulans, and it's really just Worf's reconciliation with that. Oh, and his dad's not alive. So yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, what were your thoughts overall on this one?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really connect super deeply with either of those storylines. You know, as I think about it more now as we're talking, I feel like I probably should watch the at least the Worf side again. The Data stuff I got and I connect. That's fine. But the Worf stuff, I think I should probably watch this episode again and pay a little bit more attention to it from just that perspective. I guess, frankly, I was bored. I found it a little bit boring. But thinking of it like from the Star Trek like legacy of who these different people are, the Romulans and the Klingons, and I feel like I should probably watch it again at a later time just to, I think I'd appreciate it a little bit more.
That's fair.
And also, like, I'm still still a little bit annoyed at the Klingon honor thing. I'm like, they're so stubborn. Like, I understand, and it's a cool concept from their culture, but like at the same time, you didn't die.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and then the fact that they like Worf kind of comes in as this he's like talking to them like they're so wrong to want want to be here there. And it was really unclear to me, where the lines of acceptance were between the Romulans and the Klingons. And then Worf comes in with all this brouhaha, and it doesn't really listen to them, it seems like, and forces them to listen to him.
Do you think that maybe some of that had to do with the fact that Worf was reconciling the fact that his dad wasn't there?
Probably, yeah. It was like he had an emotional attachment to that realization, and then was like, okay, I need to fix something.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, there was certainly that characterization part.
Big expectation management, expectation versus reality, you know.
Right.
He's visualizing going there, liberating this prisoner camp, finding his father, you know, and all of this, and then like none of that happens.
None of that happens, right? But then also he was like trying to find his father to like berate him. He wants to like yell at his dad for like, why didn't you die?
Right.
And trying to figure that out. So it's like a whole mess of things that I didn't quite like
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the storytelling, I do agree that it's a slow episode. The second part especially, because it is just really Worf on this planet.
And I love Worf. We know this.
We know.
But
but yeah, I think it's just, you know, the whole idea of having this two-parter crossover Deep Space Nine episode is great in theory, and then it's just trying to execute it in an interesting way that I think was a little bit of a struggle. And yeah, I mean, I do agree. The second part is slow, and it's a slow episode. And
okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have at least that.
I was not riveted by it. No. I do think, like, I do like the fact that Worf had this opportunity to talk to the kids that were born there, to just kind of be like, hey, you know, it's this interesting discussion about, like, being raised, you know, nature versus nurture, like, what environment you're raised in versus, like, your heritage and your culture, and how some of that can be washed out of you. And you know, there's lots of studies about immigrant culture, how it kind of, you know, skips that generation, you know, where there's like this throw back and forth of trying to, like, for lack of a better word, assimilate into a culture. And then this sort of next generation, not intended, but the next generation feels this drive to reconnect with that culture, you know, and learn about it and emulate it as much as possible. And I'm not an expert in any of this. I've read those studies, and I do find that interesting. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what they're addressing here a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit for sure. And as I think about it, it's almost like reverse first generation mentalities, right? Because their first generation, the parents in this one, are like melding with the Romulans, you know, they're having relationships and children, and those children now are, like you said, re-identifying with the old ways and the homeland. So it's like a reverse first generation mentality.
It's interesting. It's really interesting. And it is nice when they kind of stand up for him, but I was I mean, I was a little bit checked out at that point. But let's talk about the first part of the episode though. Or the first of the two-part.
Yeah.
So you have no idea who Julian Bashir is.
I do not. I was like, oh, there's a person.
That person means nothing. It'll be interesting to get your thoughts on Julian Bashir when we start Deep Space Nine, because I think he was one of the least fleshed out characters when Deep Space Nine starts. And I think it's a pretty universal attitude that Bashir, he grows on people. Most people he grows on, but he has to start from not high.
I could definitely see that being me.
Yeah, and so I wonder, like, if some of this was to try to bake in some of more character development, because I really think they didn't know. I personally think that they didn't know much about what to do with him.
Interesting.
When the show started.
Well, I mean, when he's introduced in this episode, like you're kind of primed, or at least feel like I've been primed to be like, yep, he's an alien, or he's evil, or he's not doing the right thing. What is he doing in that room? Clearly he's not supposed to be there.
That's funny. Like, not knowing Julian Bashir, just thinking like he's presented as that red herring evil plot twist.
Exactly. I was like, I don't know this person.
Funny.
So
maybe he secretly infected Data with this dream and it's showing his program.
Right.
That's awesome.
And the way he's talking to Data as well is kind of like the Measure of a Man episode, where he's like obsessed with Data's ability and personality and everything. And so I'm like, what is he doing? Why is he talking to Data?
That is so funny. But I do think that that's pretty on brand for like early Julian Bashir in terms of your reaction. You know, it's like, something's up with this. Like, I don't know why I don't like this guy. I feel like I am supposed to, but I don't quite trust him. And I'm endlessly amused by that revelation. I love it. But I think, you know, knowing where I'm sitting, knowing Julian Bashir, you can, anytime anyone goes back and watches the first season of Deep Space Nine, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's a tool. Like, you know, so it's easy to go back, and because I think they didn't know what to do with him, and he still had some fleshing out to do, even, there's not like they've baked this in early, you know, to have big character growth. I think that it was like, what are we gonna do with this guy? Mm-hmm. As opposed to like, you know, those characters where they do have arcs planned out for them, and then you get to see that unfold, but you see those seeds planted early on. Mm-hmm. Those seeds really aren't there here, and so it is hard. And I think that they were genuinely trying to be like, you know, that he was trying to show interest in Data in a different way, where, like, I mean, it's pretty explicit dialogue where he's just like, you know, Geordi sees him as a friend. Other people see like these big things, but he's like, but you're asking about my heartbeat and my breath, and, you know, he's like, totally. But I find it interesting. And we're supposed to be like, oh. But really we're like,
but we do see Data painting, which comes back in Picard.
Yeah, we do.
So I thought that was cool.
Seriously, and there's a lot of, he replicated a lot of paint.
Well, he doesn't need the food rations, so.
You make a fair point. But it's interesting, like, his dream and trying to figure out what's happening is interesting. And it was funny for me because it was like just that day or the day before when I watched this episode again, I had one of those dreams where it was like, you know, you wake up, your alarm's gone off, you don't have to get up right away, so you go back to sleep, and you end up having a really vivid dream. And that's exactly what happened. I had this super vivid dream that was like hours worth of content, you know, of like story unfolding that I remembered and was incredibly vivid. And then, you know, when I woke up, it was like 7:45. It was like 45 minutes had passed. And so, and then I watched this episode, and the fact that, you know, he visualized all this and he was just out for a little bit is funny. Tapping into how our brains work.
Yeah. Well, and I did love the detail that Soon programmed this to happen only if he had reached a certain level of sentience, I guess. Yeah. And it wouldn't happen if he hadn't gotten that far. So I kind of liked that little puzzle of the mechanics of Data, and the closer he gets to his just growing, basically, this would happen. Yeah. And it happened, apparently happened too soon, but he still was like processing it in a good way. So
yeah, it is cool, this idea of like a sleeper program for artificial intelligence, that, you know, they've reached that singularity in the sense that the artificial intelligence is self-aware to know where their gaps in their learning are and to try to seek that out. But then there's still going to be limitations to what their programming is actually capable of. and then having this as a sleeper program. It reminded me of like Cylons kind of in Battlestar Galactica, where it's like, you know, they get woken up at some point, like whenever they're needed, but these programs activate, and that's kind of, I mean, it wasn't, he didn't go on like a murdering robot rampage, but it's still, but it's an interesting concept. I did like that a lot.
Yeah. And then when he goes to Picard, I love this bit because Data always defaults to, I'll do all this research on thousands and thousands of years of dream interpretation of all these different cultures from all different galaxies. And Picard's like, well, you're not, you know, why are you doing that research instead of just looking at yourself? And I thought that was really profound because Data constantly has to be reminded of that.
Right.
When we see him do these sorts of explorations, you know?
Where it's like, yeah, don't seek the answers in textbooks, seek it inside who you are, because you are someone.
Right.
Aw. That's so sweet. I love it. That's I mean, yeah, I find it's really interesting. Like I said, I mean, the theme in this episode is it's like fathers. Yeah. This is about fathers.
So perfect.
And you know, so it's Data kind of getting to connect with his father through dreams, through the sleeper program, and then Worf thinking he's gonna and seeing his dad in a different light for a brief moment, and then having that taken away. But then, I mean, I would argue that at the end of the second part of Birthright, he does kind of become a bit of a father figure to those kids.
Oh, for sure.
And how great is it for Worf to be able to educate someone else on Klingon culture? You know, when he's always been the one who's felt like he was behind the curve and having to learn and catch up with what it means to be a Klingon. Now he can educate someone else. And I do find that sweet. It's just
definitely
a slow episode.
But also, why did that guy tell him in the first place that this place was there? You don't ever know.
Was it genuine like misinformation? Because I remember a scene where they're trying to go get him, you know, when they're trying to go get Worf, and isn't he talking to Picard?
Well, he does mention that this person tried to sell me information that my dad's alive. But then, like, why did he do it why did that guy try to sell him that information in the first place?
Yeah.
Just to make a profit? Or
I mean, possibly. That is interesting, though. How did they figure out where he was? How did they figure out where Worf was? He came back and...
I don't know.
Because Worf kind of just pieced out of there.
Yeah. Right? He goes like, no uniform. He buys the guy's information, who shuttles him to the camp and says, you need to be back at this place in 15 hours. And Worf just goes there, but then he's attacked.
Yeah.
And so the guy leaves, and then I don't think we even see how he gets back to the Enterprise, actually. I think it just ends with, I don't know. Oh, no, it ends with them coming on the Enterprise. That's right.
Do, yeah, because they get on, and then Worf tells them that they were not survivors of the Khitomer massacre, that they were rescued from a shuttlecraft accident. To
keep the secret of the camp.
Yeah, so it's interesting why he did that. I mean, maybe he genuinely, like you said, maybe it was just for money that he was selling that.
Funny.
Yeah, Mikhail mentioned, you know, if the androids, what's the difference about the android thing? Like, if an android's brain can create new synapses and develop, it is interesting. What's the difference between having a sleeper program versus having it sort of just be that he makes those connections at some point himself?
Yeah.
That those synapses are built. But it's still weird when you have dreams that seem like they're 8 hours long. I mean, there was like parties, and then it was like, it's so weird. And then it's only 20 minutes. Like, how do our brains work? It's just, it's
totally bizarre.
We'll just all go back to Barclay in the previous one where he's like, end program.
And then you wake up and maybe you're still in the dream.
Exactly.
We'll get to that later.
Exactly. But before then, we'll talk about Starship Mine. So this is kind of a cool, like, you know, isolated, like, this is the type of episode you would see in almost any action show, you know, where it's like the ship is docked, they're basically degaussing the ship, you know, except they're doing baryon purge. We'll not worry about any of that. But they're docked, and so they have to be off the ship for a period of time. They have just the best annoying dude. They're all, anyway, before we get into that, they're evacuated for maintenance. Picard is trying to escape the annoying dude, and so he goes back to the ship to get his riding saddle, which we'll also talk about. And he gets trapped on the ship. It turns out that these, like, are a bunch of thieves that are trying to, like, steal stuff while it's in this process. It stars Tim Russ, our favorite Vulcan, not as Tuvok, but so this is the pre-Tuvok episode.
Well, for a split second, I was like, wow, he was undercover with the Maquis for a long time.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, could be. But I think in typical Star Trek fashion, this was one of those things where, hey, we get a guest actor, and he was easy to work with and showed up on time, and let's audition him for other stuff.
Very confusing. And then I'm, like, honestly surprised that they do that. It's kind of funny because, like, these characters, it's not like they're an extra in the background with no dialogue. They're, like, legitimate characters.
Right.
Like Tom and, you know, and they're like, well, we'll just cast you as another person.
Right. It is funny.
I love that.
There were some rounds, wasn't it going around, I think, to, like, this past week, where someone was talking about, I feel like this was a Twitter discussion, saying that, like, Tom Paris should show up in Picard and have Picard be like, hey, Daniel or David or whatever, and everyone's like, hey, Tom.
That would be good. Yeah. Just to, like, acknowledge the joke, like, or just acknowledge,
lean into it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. But yeah, I mean, this is just a genuinely, like, suspenseful, you know, as opposed to the previous one, which is heavy on the story. This is not heavy on the story, but this moves. You know, it's a quick episode.
It was fun.
It's a good one. I did enjoy it. I cracked me up. I was thoroughly enthralled and entertained by when they are in the sort of welcome quarters while the ship is under repair, having their little, you know, nibbles and snacks and meeting everyone. The Starfleet officer who's there trying to talk to everyone and just annoying the bejesus out of everyone.
Oh, I know. And it's funny because, you know, we all know that person at a party. Yeah. And it's like, oh, good God, get me out of here.
Yep. And the looks they're all giving and then, like, how they're trying to, like, get out of it, you know? Mm-hmm. Some excuses better than others.
Yeah, but I love, like, are we going to talk about the saddle now?
We can talk about the saddle now, yes.
So, like, Picard, like, legitimately has the saddle, and everyone thinks that he's, like, making up this, like, stupid excuse to get off the and, like, he actually has one. It's like, no, he was telling the truth.
Yeah, because that was his out from the conversation, is he basically, because he said, like, oh, you know, the riding horses out to, you know, these fields, and Picard's like, horses? And he's like, yeah, we have horses. He's like, oh, I'm gonna go get my saddle so I can go ride these horses. And was it Troy and Geordi are just like, you have a saddle?
Yeah. Every serious rider has its own saddle, and that little thing, like, goes through everybody, and then like at the very end, it's like all three of them are telling somebody else, well, didn't you know every rider has their own saddle?
Whereas it wasn't like Worf who was super on his side. He was like, obviously.
Oh, I think, yeah, I mean, he was confused, but then it made sense.
Oh yeah, that's
but right. Like, the amount of times they said saddle and the way they said saddle, I was just like, is there supposed to be this innuendo here? I know.
And I mean, it was a dapper riding outfit. We'll give him that.
Oh, well, it was a special riding outfit. I was like, oh, that is velvet. I'm not sure that's going to breathe very well.
Oh, so funny. So funny. I think, so the saddle thing is hilarious. It's more funny now that we've fixated on it a little bit. But the other thing that cracked me up, yeah, exactly. The other thing that cracked me up was Data was like emulating the annoying dude.
Oh, God.
Because he was so expressive. He was like, call me so-and-so, and it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm doing this, and hey, we've got this. And then they finally fobbed Data off onto him, and it's just like, it reminded me of that in The Office where, like, Andy shows up, Andy shows up to the office, and he's, like, imitating Michael Scott, and the two of them end up, like, talking to each other, because he's like, imitation is a good, networking tool. And that was exactly this scene when they meet each other, because Data's just mirroring it back to him, and this guy's enthralled. He's having a fabulous conversation.
That was brilliant. It was like that. I love that intro to like why he's doing that in the turbo lift when he's like trying to talk to Picard about the weather.
Yeah.
He's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. And it's just all the behind, and it's like you see Data in the background behind the pillar being like.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
So good.
So yeah, aside from that, I mean, then, the thieves kind of out themselves. Picard is on the ship, stuck with them. The rest of them are kind of held hostage, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of there, and it's...
So, also, when they're trying to fix Geordi's visor in order to, like, cause this distraction, they're talking really loudly. Like, this episode was like all kinds of like, I don't know if they were trying to be funny or if it was but they're like in like loud stage whispers, like maybe we can turn Geordi's visor into a thing that will make everybody unconscious, and the guys are just there with their guns like didn't hear a thing.
It's like the Monty Python Holy Grail.
Yeah. It was very Monty Python.
But they were very conscious of how they appeared.
Yes. they were the words they were saying did not match their expressions.
Right. They were very self-conscious about that. But I mean, all that, whether it was supposed to be more tongue-in-cheek or taken more seriously, it's still a good high-stakes, are they going to get out episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the people on the Enterprise, like, they weren't taking any prisoners. I think she was bad news.
Yeah. And I did like, that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of Die Hard, honestly. Like, when, in the best, anyone who knows me knows how deep my love for Alan Rickman goes.
Yes.
And Die Hard is one of my favorite movies. I watch it at least once a year, quote it beginning to end. And it was kind of reminiscent of Die Hard, where they have the hostages there who are trying to, like, stage whisper their way out of it. And then when they catch Picard and he's trying to, like, pretend that he's the tailor and he's all innocent, and he's like, no, I was just here and I was trying to get, and then I got lost and the power went off and it was so scary, and it was fun. It's a fun episode. So.
It is.
Yeah,
it was enjoyable.
Yep. All right, the next one is lessons. I have thoughts on lessons.
I'm very eager to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so this is the one where there is a new, is it stellar cartographer, Lieutenant Commander Darren, who is on the ship, and Picard falls in love with her. They fall in love with each other. And then there's an away mission, and things go wrong. They thought she died, and then they come, and then she's actually alive, and they basically have to break up. My first issue here is, how is it not a rule that captains... I mean, this is kind of... Because Voyager made that very clear. captains don't date.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently in this episode, I mean, they go out of their way to say, oh yeah, there's no rules about officers dating. But maybe this is why there are now rules in Voyager time. So the power dynamic made me very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Made me very uncomfortable. It is a good episode for the Beverly Picard shippers because there's a lot of, like, you can see how hurt Beverly is with the fact that he's with this woman. The music, I think, is beautiful. My favorite scene from this episode is when they are doing the riff on Frère Jacques. And, like, the duet and what it turns into is stunning. It's beautiful.
Gorgeous, yeah.
I do kind of wish that this had been included, and maybe it was and we missed it, but that this had been included in pre-Picard recommendations. Just because I feel like it's a good closure for Inner Light, that you feel like he is still thinking about his time with that species. He still plays the flute. It's on his mind on a regular basis. The fun side is, and we can have, this was me vent. I needed to about this episode, but there were some entertaining aspects. One of them was, like, when I watched it and Picard's basically going around his business at like 3 a.m. trying to get tea and do things, and they're like, power's been rerouted to stellar cartography. Power's been rerouted to stellar cartography. And I was like, this is damn astrophysicists, man.
Those odd hours.
Yep. And then the sort of, the first reveal where he does go to stellar cartography and she's there in the dark working, I was like, that is every grumpy telescope operator I've ever dealt with at 3 a.m. Just stay away. I'm trying to do my job and I'm a night owl and I don't like this. So, anyway, what were your thoughts on this episode?
I don't know. I loved the music part, like you said, and their connection over that. I don't know if it was just me, but they seemed to have zero chemistry. In my opinion, is that?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was just a little bit tough. They had, I felt maybe it's because they had this intellectual connection over the music, and then for that to transcend so quickly to a physical, it just didn't seem to go very well.
Yeah.
And what else did I think? It was kind of heartbreaking that they had to split ways. I do think that was because he clearly doesn't open himself up that much, of course, and this was like the second most meaningful connection he's had since Inner Light, and the fact that he expressed that to her was, I think, really vulnerable for him. But yeah, like I didn't get much from this, honestly. I think if I felt like they had stronger chemistry, it would have felt a little different.
I would agree. I think that if it had the potential to be devastating, like like Inner Light, like it had the the potential for you to just be like, oh god. I found the rollaway piano goofy. Every time that thing came out, I was just like, that is a child's toy that you bought at Toys R Us.
Yeah, right. It was the same thing.
She's like, and it's just like a, what was that? It was like a 2-octave, like, keys are this big. It's all flat. I mean, it was like, we give credit to budgets and what they need to do with this, and she's got to play the piano everywhere she goes, because that's her instrument. But, that was
funny.
Yeah, it was a bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, you go. Honestly, yeah.
No, you go. It's this horrible telephone game. I mean, again, it's the Outlander theme. I mean, it was even more apparent this time than in Inner Light. It literally is the same 5 notes, I think, 4 or 5 notes, and then it goes somewhere else, and it's so distracting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the Outlander theme being based on like a traditional Scottish melody as well. It's just, yeah, I mean, it is.
It really is.
So funny. Yeah, and it is interesting. I wish that it hadn't been a lieutenant commander on their ship. Like, I just wish that she could have so easily been a visiting researcher. She could have so easily, like, they could have done so many different things with that. And just, I mean, in any military, academic, any structure like that, for good reasons, there are reasons you don't date within your own power structure. And he's the captain. And so having her be reassigned and then, like, that on top of the lack of chemistry. Of course, that being said, I mean, I'm like, I will readily admit that I have problematic issues, like, you know, when it comes to, if you're gonna pick like my ideal fanfic shipping, like I am all about the sort of mentor-mentee type. Right. As we've discussed before in this with the Q episode, but so I you know, in real life is different for sure. But I do appreciate a good amount of chemistry. And I think if they had chemistry and you felt more invested in their relationship as a couple, then it might have been a little easier as a viewer to look past it. But I think it was just weird how they drove home. And then it was like, you know, then him having to like talk to Deanna about, you know, should I feel guilty? Should I pursue this? Should I not? It just, them being in a power, you know, chain of command just made it icky. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But I guess if we're going to talk about it like an after school special, you know, then that's this is why.
Right.
From like that, not sort of the power dynamic, but the getting too invested in mission
losing objectivity. Yeah,
exactly. And there's been interesting discussions with that, as particularly if anyone's read, and I can highly recommend if you haven't, I recommend this all the time, but there's a book by Mary Roach called Packing for Mars that's a nonfiction book about like all of the considerations for going to Mars, and it's a really entertaining read. But one of the things that she discusses in the book is, you know, when they've done analysis on like the most ideal arrangement for humans to go to Mars for such a long, dangerous mission, you know, they looked at having couples go, but then the biggest downside to that is that they'll choose their partner over the mission, and they can't have that.
Right.
So it is something that we talk about, but it's, I mean, it's an okay episode. I think it's great if you're in love with Picard. Like if you're a Picard fangirl, I get it, and this is one where you get to see him in a romance. So you get to see him making out in a Jeffries tube, which is, you know, right for fan fiction, and I have zero problem with that. We can all be Lieutenant Commander Darren if we want.
Right.
But yeah, it's, you know, and then they close it up pretty neatly, and you know, I'm glad that they didn't have her die. You know, that they did more make the conscious decision for them to stay separate. So, they cleaned it up nicely. But all right, so the next episode is The Chase. Classic episode. This episode starts off with Picard's old archaeology professor, Professor Galen, coming onto the ship, asking Picard to come with him to do this big, super secret, super industry-changing mission that he wants. What it turns out is that they found like a unified DNA that all of these species share, and these pieces have been kind of spread throughout the quadrant, at least. And so Professor Galen dies, right? He dies. And then, but they are able to piece it together. They end up with a Cardassian, a Klingon, going to find this final piece that they all have. Romulans show up, and then they meet effectively the Ancient One, you know? But they have you know, they talk about the fact that there was this ancient race who seeded DNA throughout the galaxy, which is why they all share a common ancestor, and really why they all look very humanoid.
Right.
So I have had a lot of conversations about this. If Muhammad is in the chat, feel free to say hi. I will post the link to his YouTube video, but I want to hear from Samantha first on your thoughts on this episode.
Well, I mean, talking about an after-school special episode,
yeah,
this kind of takes the cake. But it was good. It was good. I mean, I liked. I feel like this was one of the first times I really felt affinity for a Klingon, just who's an extra character in the thing.
Awesome.
Because he was one of those characters, the one that does the arm wrestling with Data and stuff. I was like, oh, I get it. Like, he's kind of cool, like fun.
He's kind of cool. Yeah. New Doc. Yeah, the arm wrestling with Data is probably my favorite scene in that, where he's like, a child, and you think go up and you're like, oh, it's arm wrestling, and then he's like, all right, 3, 2, 1, and Data just knocks him, and then he headsbutt him and like knocks over, and he's like, yeah, I'm a robot, dude. Like,
yeah, but he's just kind of like, he's sort of bumbling, but like kind of like happy and excited to be there and everything, and super cool with Worf, and like, anyway, I just really liked him. And you know, this had kind of a cool, like, almost Indiana Jones-ish cadence to it, with all the different parties trying to get to the artifact. And then, but at the end, it's so funny. Like, she's giving her whole speech, and the camera's like panning to all the different people, and they're all like listening to her kind of thoughtfully. And then she finishes, and the Cardassian's like, "That's bullshit."
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's so funny. It's I do really like, because I mean, like, we already know I have a lot of affinity for Klingons. That most of it though comes from Deep Space Nine. I will follow Martok to the end of days, and I have the House of Martok tattooed on my arm. So I love Martok. But like, New Doc is kind of similar in that sense of like, he just embodies the type of Klingon that I really like, that I have fun hanging out with. And I do like the sort of visual when they go down to that planet for the first time, that it's essentially Picard and Beverly, and then the 2 Cardassians, and then New Doc, and Worf is kind of standing with him. So it's like he's kind of still representing you know, because New Doc's by himself, that he's still like, I got your back, bro.
I
like,
missed that. Yeah, it's we're in
this.
Totally.
Yeah. So I'll put the link in here, and if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, I'll put the link in the description as well. But this is my good friend, our good friend. You've met Muhammad. And for those of you Star Trek fans who have come to the cruise or Star Trek Las Vegas, you know Muhammad as well. Professor Muhammad Noor from Duke University is a biologist and also a consultant for Star Trek now, who helps us out with the biology side of things. And he has done this video explaining the science behind this particular episode. So how you could have this sort of unified DNA. And it's a great video. I highly recommend that you watch it. I'll ramble about the science a little bit, but where he's coming from is saying, like, this idea that there's sort of a unified DNA that's sort of been seeded throughout the solar system, for me, and from like an astrophysics perspective, that's not unreasonable. That, we've talked about sort of comets, interstellar objects that go through, they collide, and they're able to spread, carbon chains and stuff that can result in life. That's not unreasonable. Where the science starts to fall apart pretty quickly is the time frame that they talk about. That this ancient culture seeded these planets, and then you got such diversity, but also not in that period of time. Watch Muhammad's video to get the whole spiel, but it is basically like, if that amount of time has passed, then we essentially have as much in common, like, with a blade of grass, you know, so we shouldn't necessarily all be humanoid. It's a nice idea, but the sort of time scales and how much it takes to evolve and the differences that you get over, you know, compounded times is really interesting. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, the video is there. Please definitely check it out. But it's kind of a neat concept, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved at the end, the Romulan, like, it spoke to him, you know, and that was a nice exchange.
Yeah.
You know.
And it is, I think this has been mentioned as a very Gene Roddenberry original series feel, you know, that the after school specials, it's like they did after school specials before those were a thing, you know?
Right.
Like Star Trek kind of invented that concept of saying, like, all right, we're using sci-fi as an allegory for our reality, and this is how we can explore racism and poverty and, you know, and religion and all of these things without getting canceled. And so this is definitely a callback to that, and I think even the indoor set, which I know, I think it was Jonathan Frakes directed it, was just kind of like, this looks really indoorsy. But it feels original series, and so
yeah. From what I've seen of clips of the original series, I definitely would think that. Yeah. I want to hear about, you had a note on the our note doc about the professor and his trying to encourage Picard to leave his life, which I thought was a little bit unreasonable. But anyway.
Thank you. This is why we share our notes. I was so ready to move on right there, and I'm glad you reminded me, because I did want to talk about it. So yeah, the reason I made this note was because that scene where they kind of come to a head, where Professor Galen's like, you're coming with me or you're not. And he's basically like, look, you were one of my top students. You threw your life away by choosing his captainship. You should have been an archaeologist. You should follow me. If you don't follow me, then everything we've gone through together is worthless. That's how I viewed it. And I know it wasn't as harsh, but that's how it felt to me.
It was pretty harsh. And it was, like I said, unreasonable. Like, he was acting he wasn't even hearing Picard at all.
And for me, the reason it so viscerally hit home was because that was a lot of conversations I had with senior professors when I left academia, who were like, you've thrown your life away. I don't know why you think that you can just head on out. You're not going to be successful outside of here. You know, there's no happiness for you outside academia. You have so much potential here. I don't know why you would even consider leaving, you know, and then the constant guilt trip of like, this is the only way you could, you know, influence future generations, and it's so important for you to have a voice here in academia, and if you don't, then what's the point of, you know, existing? And it was brutal. And whoever wrote the dialogue for this had that conversation from a mentor before, because it really hit home, and it was awful. It was an awful thing to say to Picard, you know? And especially as someone who does have so many interests and who does like wear so many hats throughout their life and are proud of what they've accomplished, to then have someone come back in your life whom you respect so much and basically say like, you're a disappointment to me, is awful. And
that's horrible,
but not uncommon.
It seems from the little that I know of pure academia, it seems like it's not the most welcoming environment to people who step outside of certain lanes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the culture of academia, right? I think, and bear in mind, I am speaking from theoretical astrophysics, so this is not, you know, I am fully aware that there are lots of other fields. I'm thinking like engineering can have very different structures, but with like the astrophysics community, it is one of those things where it's like you go from undergraduate directly to grad school, directly to postdoc research to try to get a professorship. At no point do you leave the academic world, ever. And so there is this culture of, you know, whether it's self-preservation or naivety or arrogance, that nothing on the outside is as good as we have it here, because it has to be. Oh, thank you for the follow. And Fluffy Butt, that's a great username. Thank you. That was just the salve I needed from getting too angry about that. Fluffy Butt has followed. But yeah, it is hard, and those big life decisions, particularly, you can see that is something that Picard agonized over, are never easy. It's never easy, and there's gonna be doubt. And then to have your mentors, like I said, whether through naivety, arrogance, whatever, make you feel like you're dumb and made the wrong decision and you'll regret your life decisions because of that, is so frustrating. So if there are any people in academia watching this who are thinking about getting out, I have your back. Reach out to me. It's hard, it's scary, and you will have those awful, awful, awful conversations, and I promise it's better for me on the outside. I did okay.
You are doing okay. I can vouch.
Thank you. But like I said, thank you for reminding me, because I did want to talk about it, because it was written so well, and it did hit so close to home that it was just kind of like, oh God, that's awful. And I wanted to push him out the airlock at that point. And I think Picard did too. He was kind of like, see ya.
It's just so unfair. I mean, it's such an unfair thing to put on somebody that way.
Yeah.
He made his decisions, and he's damn successful as a captain, and he's still, like you said, he still follows those interests. He's still super interested in archaeology, and it's where his little kid brain goes, you know, when he gets excited about those things, but just happened to not pursue it in favor of something else.
Yeah. So follow your happiness, people.
Follow your happiness.
But it's so funny, because I really do, when I think about the chase, I think about the genetics thing, the shared, you know, DNA. And I forgot about this thing with his professor. And it's important.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for reminding me. But the last episode we're going to talk about is Frame of Mind.
One more.
Yeah. So Frame of Mind is the one where all reality has crumbled. Thank you, Mikhail. Cheers. He basically, it looks like he's having an episode that, and I'm not a mental health professional, so please forgive me if I use the incorrect terminology, but it looks like he's having a breakdown, and then it turns out that he's rehearsing a play, but is he? And he has a dream that he's actually in that scenario in the play, but then in the dream it's actually reality. And then he kills himself like 4 times. He runs through a wall like 3 times. Like,
this was crazy.
It's a crazy episode.
This was a crazy episode. And the thing is, when it started, and it was him doing that, like, and I heard Data's voice as the doctor, I was like, okay. Like, to me, that did not seem real. I was like, he's either rehearsing for Beverly, or he's having a dream or something. This is definitely, there's something here that makes me think this is not like a real situation. And I was right. But then I was like wrong and right and wrong and right and wrong and again. And it's like, and then like they throw in so much into this episode. Like there's one part where they're trying to convince him that he has multiple personalities, and like all the characters on the Enterprise are personifications of his personalities. And I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
But also just terrifying.
Right? It is. It's bonkers. And yeah, Bagel, agreed. Like, Frakes is going from, and I don't know what order that they filmed any of these in, but like directing the chase, which is a heavy episode, and then having to act in this one. And this is, I mean, it is wonderful acting.
It's fantastic.
But I do think like around the halfway point in this episode, I was just kind of like, stop trying to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly, because you as a viewer, we had so many fake outs anyway, because they rescue him and then it's like, that's not real. And then basically from the beginning, when by the end of the episode, you realize that everything you saw in the beginning was also fake.
Right.
Like, and that to me was like so mind bendy. It was like, oh shit. What has happened?
Yeah, because it does end up that he was kidnapped, I think.
He was going on the undercover mission and was kidnapped.
Right.
Yeah.
And under that circumstance, his brain, whatever they were doing to him, caused him to like relive the most recent thing that he could remember.
Right.
And that was being in this play. Yeah, the most trippy scene for me, I think, was when it's about like 2/3 of the way through, but when they think that he's rescued, but then he's not, and so he's with the interrogator, like screaming at him, but then the audience is like the TNG audience, and they're all applauding, and he's not ending it. You know, he's continuing to act, and then they all are like, "Oh, standing ovation!" And then he just like runs through the back door on the stage, and then it all shatters again. It's just like, whoa, yeah. What?
Yeah, and the way this was filmed too was like so great. Very kind of classic horror movie type shots when he's like looking up and the guy's there, and then looks up again, this guy's not there, and like very just, yeah.
And then they have they get to that really high stakes climax, and then it shatters. Like, I loved the shattering to make you realize that wasn't real. It was such a good way of, you don't feel like you're being toyed with, in the sense that you're not losing the faith of the story. You know, you're not like,
exactly,
F this, like, whatever, I don't care anymore. You're still like, wait, that wasn't real.
Yeah. Yeah, it was gripping in that way, just really, and yeah, really fantastically acted and well shot.
Yeah, I think if people are looking for those, this is what I put in the notes, is like, if you're looking for that episode where it's like you want to watch some Star Trek, but it's like Halloween, or you want to watch something creepy, this is a good one to keep on the list of
definitely
like, a good creepy Star Trek episode. So yeah,
definitely.
Fun set.
Yeah, fun
group of episodes. Still enjoying it?
Oh, for sure.
Good. Any favorite characters change? This was sort of a weird set of episodes, actually.
It was fun, but it was weird to me. Like, I think I told you I was a little bit hungover yesterday, and I had watched most of these yesterday. And I think it ended, and I was like, that was a weird set of episodes.
Well, yeah, because there wasn't any there wasn't huge like character development episodes. They were all very standalone.
Very standalone, yeah. So, and all just a little bit off. Not in a bad way necessarily, but just kind of like,
yeah,
I don't know, weird.
Yeah. Valid. Yeah, we're seeing the characters, I think, in, you know, it's going through Picard with the relationship, going through, you know, Jonathan Frakes, and then this whole understanding of like the origin of humanity. And like Mikhail mentioned, that is kind of like the genetic Tower of Babel type story, you know, that it's interesting. And they're all kind of like, I feel like the overall mood of this set of episodes is just like,
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah. So I think next week we are going to finish season 6. So we will go from Suspicions, which is the next one after Frame of Mind, and then we will watch both part 1 and part 2 of Descent. So it's the end of season 6 and the first episode of season 7, so we don't have to leave you on a cliffhanger.
I appreciate that.
Unlike everyone else who was watching this in real time had to deal with every season cliffhangers, but
sorry.
Yeah, but these are some fun ones. This one includes Second Chances, which is for those of you who know, it's one of my favorite episodes. It's a fun one.
All right.
But yeah, should be good. So thanks for the discussion, Samantha.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
And have a good Father's Day, everybody.
Yeah, have a good Father's Day. We will see you next time, and live long and prosper. All right. Bye, everyone.